Hi, everyone. Welcome to another podcast of It's Your Life. I'm your host, Paul Zimney. I'm a CPA and licensed health and life insurance advisor here in St. Louis, Missouri. Together with my partner, Shannon Carpenter, we're going to lead into a topic today, leaving a positive legacy. And of course, our goal in these podcasts, as always, is to help you improve your life, your family's life, and your legacy. There's many ways to leave a positive legacy. The work you did in your life, the relationships you kept in your life, how you loved and took care of your family members, helping others through volunteering, charitable contributions. All those things are important. My father, who passed away 13 years ago this month of cancer, unfortunately, was a great man, in my opinion. And in order to continue his legacy, I actually wrote a book about him. And here it is. It's called The Last 15 Days. In this book, I really wanted to serve two purposes. I wanted to, number one, leave a lot of stories and memories for my family members and even into future generations so they would know who my dad was and what he did in his life. And then also to help others by sharing important aspects of the final days of his life, which included some really unique and important things such as the DNR decision that we all made at the hospital, going into hospice, what that all means, planning his own funeral in several days before he actually passed away. Those are all things that, you just don't think about frequently and you just don't really understand until you go through it. So that was part of my reason for writing this book, was to help people in the future. So before we talk any specifics here, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon just to give some general thoughts on leaving a legacy.
Sure, Paul. I'm sorry to hear about your dad. My dad also passed away whenever he was 53 years old. He was standing on a chair hanging a backdrop at a fishing expo, and he fell backwards, hit his head on a table, and they said that it apparently caused a massive coronary, and he had a shock sent to his heart, and he died instantly, 53 years old. And I was only 21. And I have so many memories of my dad, but it's kind of strange, like when you're younger, you get through that, like, my parents are stupid, like they don't know anything, you go through that whole phase, right? And just kind of roll your eyes half the things they tell you. And then as you get older, you're like, dad's pretty sharp, like he knows a thing or two, and then they pass away and you realize all the lessons that they taught you, and you realize that basically whatever you are today is because how your parents raised you, right? So leaving a legacy is huge. And obviously, one of the greatest legacies of our time is probably J.D. Rockefeller. Here, 13, 14, however many generations it is later, his family still knows his name. They still know who he is. They never met great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaddy Rockefeller, but because of what he left behind and what he built and how he set up his family's future, they're never going to forget his name.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear about your dad as well, Shannon.
Thank you.
Very difficult. Okay. And thank you for sharing that. So one way we can leave a positive legacy for ourselves and for others, for our loved ones, is being prepared when that day comes. And that day, I'm meaning the day that we all will pass away someday in the future. Whether someone passes away from a long illness, as my father did, or suddenly, as Shannon's father did, immediate action has to be taken by the family. Typically, one of the first steps is setting up the arrangement meeting, which is usually possibly the day of, or more typically the day after someone passes away. I'll kind of use an example here. So if a family member dies on a Sunday, you're generally meeting with the funeral home the next day on Monday. Okay. Here's what one of the first things they're going to ask after they get some of the basic information is, how are you going to pay for this funeral? Okay. And they're going to give you a few options. You can pay with cash. You can pay with a validated check confirming the funds are in the bank. You can pay with a debit or credit card, or you can pay with a life insurance policy. Okay. A lot of people take out life insurance policies with the intention that they are to be used for their funeral costs. All right. However, there's a few very important mechanics involved with processing that life insurance policy, if you will. And again, before the funeral home will begin all of the preparations, the embalming, the death certificate, cremation permits, they're going to want the 100% payment up front, because those funerals are not inexpensive, and they're not going to just accept someone on a handshake. Maybe they did that in the past and they learned that that didn't work out too well for them financially. So another point is we run into different people who say to us in terms of when we're talking about life insurance, well, I don't need a funeral policy. I don't need a life insurance policy for that because I have a lot of equity in my home, as an example, or I own, rental properties. So I've got a lot of equity in those properties, or I've got investments. I own stock. I have a money market or a mutual fund. Well, think about this for a second. You go into that funeral home, the family member passes away on a Sunday, you go into that funeral home on Monday. There is absolutely no way you are prepared to give them funds from equity in a home or a rental property or investments. Those are all going to be tied up for quite a bit of time before any actual cash proceeds are developed from those. So keep that in mind as well. Now, when you give the funeral home a life insurance policy, a very important aspect, the beneficiary of the policy has to sign an assignment form to either the funeral home or a third-party financing company in order for them to accept that as payment for the funeral. Keep in mind, once the policy owner passes away, that person obviously is no longer in control of the life insurance policy. The only person in control of that life insurance policy is the legal beneficiary of the policy. That may not be the spouse, or that may not be a child who has, power of attorney or something. It's whoever is stated on the life insurance policy. Very important that selection is made if you intend for a life insurance policy to be designated for your funeral costs. That beneficiary has to know that. That beneficiary has to be available to sign that assignment form and in agreement, because legally that's money that's going to them. Speaking of that third party I mentioned, so in some cases, the funeral home does not deal with the direct assignment of the life insurance policy. They contract with a third party financing company who the beneficiary then assigns the life policy to that third party company, and the third party company will process it, pay the funeral home the cost of the funeral, pay the beneficiary the remaining proceeds, but they will also charge usually around a 5% fee for doing that. And that's 5% of the total amount of the life insurance policy. So one important takeaway there is it is beneficial to have a smaller, call it $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 life insurance policy that is devoted just to the funeral. Because if you're giving the $50,000, $200,000, $500,000 life insurance policy to the funeral home, and they run that through the third party, that third party is going to charge 5% of whatever that face value of the life insurance policy is, which could be quite a bit of money. All that being said, when that is all taken care of, then, you know, generally the actual burial is usually within about 4 to 8 days to just round out that timeline. But the point of all this is for, you know, for your family to think this through, to plan ahead of time. There is no time once that day comes. There is no time to do any planning whatsoever. It's all reactionary. As one of the funeral home directors I spoke with recently said, they have seen too many instances where a family comes in, there is no life insurance policy, there is no cash available, and now 4 or 5 family members are pulling out their credit cards and maxing their credit cards out just to cover, you know, 10, 12,000 of funeral costs so they can get the process started. That's it on my end, Shannon. I'll let you wrap it up. But again, point here is, you know, plan ahead and leave that positive legacy in this area.
Sure, Paul. That's good stuff. That's a lot of information. 2 things came to mind while you were talking. You know, one, you know, I always see these GoFundMe things on Facebook, and it kind of drives me crazy. Like, GoFundMe was not designed for life insurance. We didn't have GoFundMe when my dad passed away. And when my dad passed away, we thought we had life insurance through his work. Turns out he had to die active duty, you know, like get shot or die in a police chase or something like that. But we got my dad buried. There was a lot of different organizations that my dad was a part of, American Heart Association, BASS, all these different places put on like a fundraiser. And, you know, we had church and family and friends, and everybody pitched in. So it's kind of like the old school GoFundMe, but that's because we didn't know that much about life insurance and how it's pennies on the dollar. So I always tell people, you can either leave generational debt or you can leave generational wealth, and the choice is yours. But I used to have a guy that would come in my office every now and then and do a little training, and his name is Tom Hegna. And I call Tom Hegna the Dave Ramsey of the West Coast. And, you know, Tom is a huge life insurance and annuity guy. Mainly his big thing is teaching people annuities. So he would come in our office and talk. And he told a story once about this old farmer that had come in to see him, and he asked for his advice on what he needed. And Tom looked over all the statements and everything he had. And this guy was worth multi-millions of dollars. I mean, he had tons of money in the bank. He owned about 4 farms. In fact, I can't use his name, obviously, but when you go to Walmart or Kroger, you're buying his products somewhere in the dairy, the eggs, all these different things. And so he came in to visit Tom, and I'm going to probably mess up the story. Tom's going to watch this and be like, "Oh, you messed it up." But it's all right. I'm paraphrasing. Essentially, Tom said, "I think you need a large life insurance policy." And the old man said, "Oh, I keep hearing people tell me that, you know, I don't need life insurance." He says, "You know how much money I'm worth? You know how much I got in the bank? I don't need life insurance." And so Tom said, "Well, you have 4 sons, right? And you have 4 farms. So let's just say that you want to leave your 4 farms to your 4 sons. Each son would get a farm, or however you want to split that up. So what's going to happen, though, is you're going to have to pay an estate tax." And you're the CPA that understands taxes. You know, they make my head hurt. But essentially, if I've got to pay estate taxes on this huge property, it's going to be, I think it was like $3 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, that the family would have had to pay in estate taxes. So the question from Tom to the man was, do your sons have collectively, you know, let's say $3.4 million laying around to be able to pay this estate tax when you die? And the answer was, well, no, they don't. And he said, okay, since you have so much money in the bank, all I'm saying is make a one-time single premium payment and buy this large $3.4 million policy so that when you die, you know, the estate tax is paid by the life insurance policy. And now your 4 sons get to keep the 4 farms that you built, right? This was your legacy. That's what you were leaving behind. And somehow it clicked with this old fellow. And he said, well, hell yeah, that makes perfect sense. He said, why didn't anybody explain it to me like that the first time? He said, everybody knows it's better to take a little bit of milk from each cow than to sacrifice one of them. So So I laughed at that story, and I still think about that today. And that was probably, gosh, that was probably 12 years ago whenever he told me that story. So hopefully I got that right, Tom. If not, I apologize, and give me a shout. Let me know how it went. So that's all I've got, Paul. Back to you.
All right, Shannon, that's a good story. I like that one about the milking and the cow there. So very good. Okay, well, listen, everyone, thanks for attending today, and we're going to see you next week for another podcast episode of It's Your Life. Have a great weekend.